I'm probably going to be walking around in the middle, so I'll set this here. Okay, welcome to class, everyone. We have several things planned. 4 things planned for today, of which we have completed 1, which was the name game. So we'll get to know each other. It's okay. I mean, we're talking about the second day of class. It's hard to remember everybody's name. Plus, you have a lot of changes, a lot of new classes, a lot of new faces. So we'll work on this until we have this down. So now that we have that complete, what we'll do today is go over pieces of chapter 1, not in its entirety, but just pieces of it. Particularly, we're going to define communication and talk about the communication model. And that's probably about all the time we'll have for chapter 1. Then we're going to switch gears, we're going to have an activity, and then we're going to switch gears and work on our projects, and then I'll get you lined up for this weekend. Just as a note, it doesn't affect our class, but Monday, the college observes the holiday. So this is a good time for us to reflect on civil rights on Monday. It's a wonderful holiday, and we don't have class. So if you typically have class on Monday, that's the day that the college is closed. The other thing I want to bring up, inclement weather. It's going to get very nasty, not just over the weekend, but I guess next week. And I want you to know, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that the college will cancel class. It's a good idea to take a look at that. But you need to know, as far as what I'm concerned, do we have people that commute? Okay, several commuters in here, about a half dozen commuters. As somebody that's commuted, for 16 years, I drove quite a distance into work. And I do understand that even though the college may not be canceled, that there are places and there are times that it's just very difficult to get in. And so I don't want anybody to feel uncomfortable that they have to be here if it's bad weather and the college didn't cancel, because I video my lectures. There's a way to make it up, and I would much rather have you safe than in here. And I'm not saying that another instructor may say you need to be here if the college is open. This also will go for those of you that are not comfortable driving in really bad weather. It's not a pass to skip class. It's pretty nice out, it's cold and chilly, but it's just something that I want you to know that I understand, and I don't want anybody risky. Not a pass. Okay, let's move on and let's just talk about communication in general. This class specifically. Why do you have to take this class?
Like in a prospective job, like giving a project information or anything like that, or presenting ideas to employers or like fellow coworkers.
Okay, fantastic. So that's exactly why you have to take this class. Now, we do ask you to take this class. It's a requirement for your degree. So there's got to be the reasons behind it, the prospective employers. But let's say that you're in there, or let's say that it's right now in your professions. Where are we working now? Okay, a nursing home. So are you in the medical field?
Yes.
Okay, so you're already working in your field. Where else do we work?
I work at a
Daycare. Is that your field as well? Very nice. So we have several of you that are already working in your fields. Okay. Do you think it's important to communicate to children?
daycare.
I mean, but they're just kids. Don't they just have to do what you tell them to?
Most of the time they don't.
Who in here has children? Okay, so we have a few parents in here. Who in here want children? Hands down. Okay, so it's going to be just about half of you will be in that situation where you're going to have to deal with children. So it isn't a matter of children don't just do what you tell them to do. So you have to communicate in an effective way to them. So that there's our professions, and I'm kind of leaning into our personal lives as well. What else? What else do we do? Okay, and why is communication important there?
There's a lot of movements, there's a lot of changes in those blueprints too, so you just kind of have to always talk to each
Very good, very good. So, and if you don't, what happens?
You'd have to cut, grind, reload, and think about it. Now, we do it myself.
So if you mess something up, it could be an entire workday that it sets you behind. Okay, that's a quiet group over here.
I don't like cookies.
Okay. Is it important that we get the right cookies?
Very.
It's very important. Anyone else want to volunteer their profession?
Custodian.
Okay, all right. Why do you need to communicate effectively in your job?
I believe I listen to complaints and talk to my team, make sure we're doing a great job cleaning buildings and office spaces.
Okay, all right. So sometimes you need to course correct. Is there anything you want to share?
Oh, I work here at the college, at the daycare center.
Okay, all right. So again, children and probably your coworkers. So you probably need to communicate with them to know things that are going on with the kids, especially when you're changing shifts or jobs, or just good information. So communication within our fields, effective communication is important. It isn't a matter of you've been talking all the time, so you know how to do it. It's that you need to be able to communicate effectively in a profession. And if you think about the community college, our roles are to serve the community, which means that what we want is, as you are reaching your goals, your educational goals, we want you to be employed by these people around us that will hire you. So we ask them, what will make you hire our students? And they say, one of the top things, communication skills. Your book talks about that in a different study, like the nationwide study, about how, gosh, what are employers looking for? Well, SEC actively looks at that too. So we're looking at top 10 things. Where do you think communication is?
Top five.
Top 3. 1 or 2, sometimes 3, depends on the year. Okay, what else do you think is in the top 3?
Reliability.
No.
How?
You would think so.
What did
You
you
would
say?
think.
Reliability?
You would think so, but it's not. What about your skill set? You doing your job, you're being trained for something. Where do you think that falls?
Ability to learn.
Your skill set.
No, but like, would that be higher up than skill
That
set?
would be,
Because I don't hire if you know how to do it, but if you can learn how to do it, I hire you.
okay, so that is, I can't remember now, but that's a good point. I can see that going up higher. What did our book say? I didn't bring my copy. Do you remember what our book said? Okay, that's important. Okay, skill set, the actual skill set, which you're in college for, usually falls between 5 and 7. Okay, so you're looking at communication, effective communication. They also have writing, interpersonal skills. Interpersonal skills will always hit the top 3, because if you can't get along with others, you're really smart. And I think I would almost like what you're saying in there, ability to learn, willingness to learn. Okay, if you don't have that going for you, then you really are going to be helpful for any organization. Doesn't matter how skillful you are or how smart you are, if they can't use that, if they can't hone into that energy, that's a problem.
Yeah, a lot of facilities here in Lincoln prefer to hire new graduates, so they can train them how they want them instead of people that work at their generation.
Which is sad, because there's a lot of experience that can go with that.
They
But
don't want to change the way they're thinking with the times.
But the thought could be, if you're able to be flexible in that area, if you're willing to have that agreeableness, to try something different, to get along with others, and that, we can go down a whole different road about how that's not necessarily true for older people, but when we're looking at what's going to make us marketable, that's the reason why they require this communication class. Public speaking is a big deal. Notice you have 3 speeches in here. So public speaking is a big deal. If you're able to present publicly, and I'm not saying that you have to be perfect, but if you have that willingness to, so again, there goes that willingness to do this, then you will be in a more marketable place than somebody else. Even if they have better grades, just think about how important this is. Okay, so we have the professional aspect down. What about, like, what else could be in it for us, taking this class? Who else do we talk to? Do we communicate with?
Family.
Do they have to talk to us?
There's building relationships that aren't necessarily professional.
Okay, so there's more to it than just getting ahead in communication. It can make your life a lot better. I'm not saying it's gonna be perfect. There's still gonna be that person that you can't get along with, or that family member that you can't stand to see at that reunion. But being able to have constructive communication with the people around you, with your children, for example, and there's a lot of us that either are parents or want to be parents, other people that are involved, our neighbors, our significant others, our parents, you know, so all those people can really benefit from effective communication. So it isn't a matter of they have to put up with you. Nobody has to put up with us. And there's a lot of people that think that. They're very rigid. Well, I'm just going to say whatever I feel like, and you're just going to deal with it, because that's who I am. But that can be a real problem in other aspects of their lives. Okay, again, it doesn't solve everything, but if you can communicate in an effective manner, and you can see this in the families, you can see this with interactions with our neighbors, with our peers. You get into a fight with somebody, or you see somebody get into a fight, and I'm not talking about like a, you know, knockdown, drag down fight, but just a verbal fight that turns out really ugly. Somebody starts calling names and loses their temper, loses their cool, their composure. It doesn't end there. They're gonna have to see that person again. They have an ongoing relationship with them. They're gonna see them, and then you have to course correct it and damage control, you know, and so it's just a lot better if we can have those tools. So really a lot of this is also in conflict management. How well are we at handling those disagreements? That's part of effective communication. Disagreeing with somebody doesn't mean there's a lack of communication. It just means you disagree with another person. Can you handle that? So those are soft skills. They make our lives a lot better. There's another thing to effective communication, and that it's actually good for our self-esteem. So some of you, if you've taken some classes in the social sciences, you probably have heard of this already. But if you can communicate your ideas effectively, both professionally and personally, people will think you're smarter. They'll perceive you as smarter. And that perception makes you feel smarter. And people will treat you differently if they think you're smarter. They will ask for your ideas. They will ask for your input. They will go to you, and that will actually give you that confidence to communicate more. And then people who don't communicate as effectively will get shut down by people around them. And that feels crummy, so they don't do it as much, and it just ends up to be a spiral. So effective communication is very important in all aspects of our lives. And then your book talks about being in a democracy. You know, our just responsibilities as citizens of the world, to be able to communicate effectively our ideas and our thoughts in order for social movement and change. Yeah, and I don't know about you, but sometimes when I look at the news, and I see people that are really upset, and I still can't figure out what they're trying to say. Okay, you don't want to be that person. You know, we have a lot of opportunities to put our thoughts and ideas out there, but are we doing it effectively? So that's another good point your book made, and just something for you to think about as we go through this class. So by this time, we have talked about the importance of a class like this. We've talked about this word communication, but we actually haven't defined it. So that's our next job. So what are your thoughts? How would you define communication?
Conveying thoughts and ideas from one person to another.
Okay, good. Okay, that's a great start. Do you want to add to that? How are we conveying those thoughts or ideas?
Being verbally or non-verbally.
Good job. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
Communication isn't just like the transmission of ideas and thoughts, it's the reception of those and whether they're received correctly.
Good. So we're getting a little bit deeper in what communication is. It's not an easy thing to define. There are many different types of different definitions. I'm going to bring up one. One thing I liked about your book is your book, and this is actually from a different text because I like the models they use in this textbook. This is from the Fromley, Rice, and Skinner textbook, their communication book. But your text mentions the verbal and nonverbal difference. I'm not sure if anybody happens to see a black screen changer around here. Let me know. Okay, so verbal or nonverbal is important because that needs to be included in this communication process. So if we're looking at how much is verbal versus nonverbal, well, scholars would disagree. But nonverbal, one thing we can agree is that nonverbal is over half of our entire communication. So if you just even read a book or look through a few articles about nonverbal communication, you will have a better idea of what's going on in any situation, a lot better than the average person. Observing what's going on, if the words and the nonverbal language are congruent, or if they match, that says something. If they don't match, that says something different. So if I'm telling you that everything is great, but my tone isn't there, everything's great, sarcasm. Stomp my foot. Why? You ask. Okay, those signals are showing an incongruence with what I'm saying and my body language, and you should question it. Something's not right, obviously. Maybe they're not going to say it at the time, but that should be a clue to you. The other thing to take a look at is of course, what's going on with their body. How do you know when somebody isn't engaged in a conversation with you? Okay. They're distracted. The other thing, which way are your feet pointing? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm listening to you. Go ahead. Okay. That's not engagement. That's not working. You know that. So nonverbal language gives us a really good clue as to what's going on. So verbal, nonverbal language, that's part of the communication process. And communication is a process. How do we define a process? How many of you have a process to get up in the morning? You need one? You may not have a very good process to get up in the morning, but the process is there. Okay, then the snooze goes off, and the alarm in the other room is on. Yeah, then you have the alarm that's across in the next room to make sure you get up. It's a real alarm.
I don't do that. I just scramble and have to do everything in 10 minutes and get to class instead.
Okay, all right, even that is a process. Maybe it's caffeine, maybe it's take the dog out, maybe it's get the kids ready. We have all kinds of things, eat something, run through that red light again. So all those things help us get there, and that goes is step by step. Now, what your book did a nice job defining a process for communication, because this is a theory here. We have many steps to this. And a process typically has an end goal. So if you're thinking of a job and you have a process of opening shop, the goal is to open shop. But with communication, this is kind of one of those floating starts and beginnings. Okay. Effective communication is still our goal, but how we get there and how we do that is going to be different. So it's a series of steps, it's changing, and it's this floating goal. So now that we know that communication is a process, it involves verbal and nonverbal communication, the other thing is that it's shared meaning, meaning that we share with others. Nothing has meant anything except that we've assigned meaning to it. So if I'm to say something, if I were to talk about the camera in the room, something's going to come to mind because we have a shared meaning with each other in agreement that when I say that word, you know what it means. We've already made these agreements within our culture, within this system. You know, and we do that with a lot of other things. So we have agreements on what things mean, and it changes from situation to situation. One of the examples I used in class was if I say table or desk, go ahead and work at your desks. Put your desks together. Because it's an educational environment, we have a shared meaning that if I say that, you're like, oh, okay, she means the tables, and you put it together. You don't even think that much about it. So we do that depending on situation, depending on culture, language. Those all change those agreements. But we do it as a group. Now next, the other parts are easier just to explain in the model of communication. Now your book talks about the linear model. They call this the transaction model of communication. Transactional is fine.